Welcome back to the channel. This is number 3 live here with Filipino American Creative. And it is so nice to be here because I get to tell you about something that I just did on Sunday. Last Thursday, I told you that I was going to be driving out to Los Angeles to go see a show. And I did that. And so I got to go see this play called Mix Mix, the Filipino Adventures of a German Jewish Boy, which played at the Los Angeles Theater Company. It was put on by Bonnie B. Alvarez was the writer, the playwright, and directed by John Lawrence Rivera. It's amazing because the reason why I went out there is because I have a girlfriend who was in the show, actually 2 girlfriends that were in the show, and simultaneously they were like, Tesz, you got to come out because there's going to be a panel, we're going to answer some questions. And also just the story itself was really captivating for me because I have a personal connection to many facets of this story, not only the Philippine side of this story, but also the German side and a little bit of the Jewish side because of my DNA being 0.2% Ashkenazi Jewish, which you can check out on one of my episodes about my discovery of my 23andMe results, as well as my Ancestry.com results. That was a second episode that I did just to verify that I really had a little bit of Jewish in me, which it definitely verified that. I just wanted to see what this interesting part of history, Philippine history, was about as it pertains to different cultures and different, histories intersecting. Because I think the last thing that people expect is that Jewish refugees would be landing in the Philippines during the Second World War to avoid Nazi persecution. And that is exactly what this story is about. It is set in the Philippines, and it is about the story of a man named Ralph Price, who actually is living. It's based on his real life experiences. And he, with his family, when he was a very young child, left what was then Germany and is now Poland after the Second World War. This part of Germany was, I don't want to say given to Poland, but it was made a part of Poland. And so he fled Germany at that time and ended up in the Philippines with his family. And the story itself takes place in the jungles of Mount Banahaw, which is a mountain just outside of Manila. And the reason why his family ended up in those mountains is because after several years of living very happily in Manila and integrating themselves into the community there, the Japanese took over the Philippines for several years during World War II. And even though the Japanese were more, I don't want to say respectful because they were pretty harsh to pretty much everybody in the country that wasn't Japanese, but they were more open to people who were white and who were German, and they didn't go after them the way that they did the Filipinos, as we were told. But eventually, this group of Jewish refugees were told that the Japanese were also going to start going after them. And so they ended up going together with a group of Filipinos. There were about 70 of them, Jewish refugees and Filipinos, that ended up in the jungles in order to escape the Japanese that were coming after them. And so this particular play, it's about this young boy's experience. And because it's from the perspective of a 13-year-old boy, it's not as, of course, there's a lot of the history that is told that was pretty harsh, but at the same time, it has a lot of that fantasy side of it because it's from his perspective as a young child having an adventure as opposed to, the heaviness of all of the fleeing and the escaping and all of the death and destruction that was happening. That was definitely an aspect of the play, but it was very much a lighter aspect and a lighter portrayal of this experience. The name of the play is Mix Mix, and that is based off of a Filipino dessert called halo halo, which we are somewhat famous for. If you know Philippine cuisine, you probably know this dessert. It's a very special and unique dessert because it's basically a literal mix of so many different ingredients. And I know my cousin who is watching, Josie, she knows what I'm talking about because it has everything from sweetness to a little bit of earthiness to a little bit of maybe even sometimes maybe sour can also be in there, depending on if you put like some of these sour fruits that we have in the Philippines. But what makes it really special is not only the fact that it's mixed of all of these different like random ingredients that you would never think to put together, but the fact that these random ingredients are put together actually makes the dish itself very delicious and very special, and enhances each of the individual flavors that are inside of this beautiful concoction of a dessert. And so that idea of mix is also putting together the idea of, this boy who's of Jewish descent, and him being put in this new world of the Philippines, and how all of these different aspects of these two vastly different cultures come together and actually mix extremely well together. In the play, there are so many references to both Jewish culture as well as Philippine culture. They talk about the schooling, for example, that this young boy had to go through. And as a Jewish boy, he had to learn English. And so he ended up going to a Catholic school and learning English through that school and being taught in that school, but then also being taught the traditions of the Catholic faith as well. And so even though he retained, of course, his Jewish religion, he was exposed to and very integrated into the Catholic way of life, which is predominant through the Philippines. There's also a scene where he's 13 years old at the time of the play, and so he actually has his bar mitzvah. And this is a little bit of a deviation from what actually happened in reality, because in reality he had his bar mitzvah in Manila at a temple there, but in the play they had it take place in the jungle, in the mountains, while they were seeking refuge in nature. And so they portrayed him having his bar mitzvah in the midst of, this beautiful jungle scape. There's also like some choreographed bits that you see where they reference, for example, eskrima, which is the national martial arts of the Philippines, as well as the Igorot dances that you will see from these native tribes. And they use that to really enhance some of the scenes where movement needs to take place. Of course, you're in this like tiny little theater, and so the stage, you can only go so far, but you have to portray them like, traipsing through the mountains and traipsing through the jungles. And so they use these types of choreography based in Philippine culture to portray that, which is really cool. And of course, the reference to mix, which is the food. And so you get a lot of like the references to this dessert, to calamansi, which is one of the first things that he drinks when he first lands in the Philippines. He talks about that. And there's just all of these wonderful bringing together of the different cultures. And it's just so nice to see that beyond Here Lies Love and beyond our, participation in a musical like Miss Saigon, which is actually a Vietnamese story, but so many Filipinos, played in that. But it's nice to see that there are new productions being put up that tell different aspects of our history and our culture as Filipinos, that it's not always the same story of, for example, I see a lot of portrayals of Filipinos in like television or in movies where we're the help and where we like rise above because, we have our wits about us and we, somehow manage to get into some weird adventure or something. And, or that we're just being played as nurses, it's like this particular story. And there's nothing wrong with those stories. Absolutely nothing wrong with those stories, of course, because it is so much a part of our history and a part of who we are. But at the same time, there's so many other stories out there. Like this story of the Jewish, refugees coming to the Philippines, which most people don't know about. As I was doing research about, how people learned about this, it's like so many Filipinos even in the Philippines don't know this part of history, even though it happened like 70, 80 years ago. But I remember reading that a man who did a documentary based off of this particular time in history where the Philippines invited Jewish refugees to take refuge in the Philippines, that his wife, who was Filipino, so this particular documentary filmmaker was living in the Philippines. I forget what country he's from, but I think he's not Filipino, but he married a Filipina. And he noticed one day, this was before he did his documentary about this point in time in Philippine history, he noticed one day that his wife was able to sing the entire song, Have Nagila, like all the lyrics, all the melody. And he was like, why do you know this? And she was like, I really don't know. And she wasn't the only one in her community. There were other Filipinos that could sing this song, but they didn't really know where it came from or why. And he did some digging, and then he learned this really fascinating part in Philippine history. So it's just nice to see that these, right, isn't that great, Josie? It's like so cool to see that there are parts of our history that are now getting exposure in this really very cool way, and in a very modernized way, and in a way that makes it engaging for people today to learn about us. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, is just this really incredible play that I got to go see. It plays until June 16th in Los Angeles. So if you get a chance, go check it out. Mix, the Filipino Adventures of a German Jewish Boy. If you have any other questions about this part in history, let me know in the comments section down below, because I definitely have, there's a whole other section about the history of why refugees were welcomed into the Philippines at that particular time, because President Manuel Quezon was very adamant about having an open door policy. And he really paved the way for decades of refugees throughout the years being able to come to the Philippines and find safety when there was none in their home country. So yeah, let me know if there's anything else you'd like to know about this particular part in history. Ask any questions down below, and I will see you next week.